You know, I think it's fair to say that these days most of us have enough trouble managing our own bank accounts, let alone an economy. But for the people in this building, the Treasury, and those outside who are economists, that is their job. And I'm going to meet a financial analyst and blogger who thinks you can't do that job unless you've studied the work of Friedrich Hayek. Louise, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Giles.
We are, of course, in the Institute of Economic Affairs, a body which Hayek inspired the founding of, and we're sat at Hayek's kitchen table.
I know.
Having a cup of tea.
It's quite exciting to be sitting here, although I imagine Hayek, being Austrian, wouldn't have drunk tea, would have had coffee and probably strudel with it.
Probably would have. Now, why do you like him so much?
I recognise a fellow fighter. He was an Austrian immigrant to this country, and his family had suffered the deprivations of between the wars of Vienna. He came with little money, and yet he took on Keynes. Wealth, privilege, education, establishment, Cambridge. This Austrian upstart took on Keynes. For that, he's incredibly brave. But also, when it became apparent, the world fell in love with Keynes. And for decades and decades after the end of the Second World War, every government followed what he had to say. Hayek stuck to his guns. He was cast in the wilderness academically. He was ridiculed. He was held in contempt. But he stuck to what he really, really believed in. And it was an unpopular message, but he kept saying it. And for that, you have to admire him.
Let's go to the LSE, where he starts his lecturing career and his sort of British economic journey, if you like. And yes, you can finish your tea first.
I will, thank you.
So, we're in the London School of Economics Old Theatre, where Hayek used to lecture. But it's quite astonishing they gave him a job, because apparently his earlier attempts were pretty turgid.
Incomprehensible is also a good word. He had a strong Austrian accent, he spoke in long sentences with lots of subclauses, and then he drew these marvellous triangular diagrams that few in the audience understood. You know, I'm very honoured to sort of stand on the Hayekian stage, but his entry to the LSE wasn't that great.
So if he is so incomprehensible, can you explain what it is he's trying to tell us?
Three things. He believed firmly in free markets. He thought that economies were highly complex and that therefore government interference would always end up badly. In fact, when they did interfere, the outcome was worse than if they had done nothing at all.
And does he have anything to do with monetarism?
Well, this is interesting because now we take it as a given that you can affect an economy by changing the interest rates. But that was really only developed by Milton Friedman. But what Friedman says is the initial work was done by Hayek. He cites Hayek when he won his Nobel Prize, so an endorsement by the great monetarist of the last century for Hayek.
Well, this audience were listening to him in the 30s. It's not for another 50 years that someone really adopts him. And to show you how important that is, I need to take you to the old heart of Toryism on earth. So, Louise, we have come to what is now Europe House in the heart of Westminster. But back in the days of Margaret Thatcher, this, of course, was Conservative Central Office. And, of course, Margaret Thatcher is crucial to Hayek's story, isn't she?
Absolutely. Hayek was ignored for decades. Everyone went mad for Keynes and his ideals. And then we had the economic crises of the 70s, stagflation. And Keynes was maybe not such a great solution to the world's economic problems. And what Thatcher did was go back to Hayek. And in particular, it's this book, Hayek's The Constitution of Liberty. And apparently she came into this building, slammed it down on the table in a very Thatcher way and said, "This is what we believe," which is fabulous. And it's all about rolling back the state, privatising state-run businesses and introducing competition as much as possible. And so it was Thatcher that brought Hayek back in from the cold, but also Reagan. You know, Reaganomics is based on the Hayekian principles, the same ideas of rolling back the state, privatising state businesses and encouraging competition. Now, clearly Thatcher and Reagan are on the right of the political spectrum, But even Bill Clinton, a Democrat, famously said in a State of the Union speech, this is the end of big government. And you don't get more Hayekian than that.
And so everyone starts studying him. His reputation is enhanced. But I guess the real question is now, of course, is he relevant to today? Dr. Elizabeth Fraser of Oxford University thinks to answer that, you need to look at Hayek's view of politics versus economics.
For Hayek, politics is bad. Whether we think of politics as governments trying to do the best they can, or whether we think of politics as politicians being snakes, for him, both ways, politics is bound up with coercion, and it's always got that element of violence in it. For Hayek, economics is the realm of freedom.
Hayek died in 1992, never seeing the spectacular financial meltdown of 2008 onwards. But having written the book on one form of economic theory, does he have something to offer us today? I've brought us back to the Treasury because it seems most relevant to me that what they're trying to do is clear up the mess if they can and try and prevent it happening again. Does Hayek have anything to teach them?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. If you took Hayek to the extremes, then in fact most of the government buildings behind us would be ripped down. Now, I'm not suggesting that. None of the big economists have all the answers. They all have something relevant to say. Keynes, Hayek and Friedman. But what's interesting in this crisis, American may have gone Keynes stimulus, but here in Britain we have chosen to cut spending and impose austerity. Very much Hayekian principles. Germany imposing austerity on the Eurozone. Well, that's another word for reducing the role of the state. Forcing Greece to privatise their businesses. Again, purely Hayekian. So highly relevant. What I really like, though, is some of his comments that he wrote or quotes that he made 70, 80 years ago, and I've chosen one. And that quote is, he said that if you want to avoid the excesses of the business cycle, banks should keep a close check on their lending. Oh, if only they had, here in the UK, would have saved ourselves 70, 80 billion of taxpayers' money. So that, as far as I'm concerned, is the reason that you should all vote for Hayek.
That's told you.